Hello, everybody. Happy to see you again in webinar number 4. Happy New Year from my side in 2021. Hope everybody could relax a little bit during the holidays and 2021 gets better this time, that we get the virus under control and can meet each other in person again. As you know, our software will come to the market early this year and beginning of April. The development of the software is almost complete, so make yourself ready to do the transition from RPC Pro to RPC Connect. Anyway, today we want to talk about the final stage of RPC Connect, the so-called test stage. And my experience over the last years is that not everybody is using the test stage from RPC Pro. They just think that this stage is somehow just to play out any drive files, and they use like MPT or other MTS software to run their durability test. And hopefully during this webinar, we can introduce some interesting features for you that make the test stage more interesting in the future. Okay, here's an outline for webinar number 4. We mainly are focusing on the use of the test stage. Then we are going to talk about the improvements of this stage compared to RPC Pro. Together, we are finally discovering some test wizard features. And I will show, let's say, as you typically know, some live demos in the software and show you some hands-on examples. Last but not least, I will show the new improved remapping feature from RPC Connect and remind you what benefits we have been seeing in the last webinar sessions to prepare you in order to start the transition to RPC Connect. As most of you can remember, we talked about the setup, analyze, model, and simulate stages. And in our last webinar here, we are going to talk about the test stage. So finally, we reached this stage to create our durability run. Let us briefly remind ourselves, why do I need the test stage? What is the test stage used for? At first glance, it seems that we just use the test stage to run our durability test. In the simulate stage, we got our final drive files and use them now as our final sequence, which is illustrated here. So we have like different scenarios recreated, like gravel, pothole, or Belgian, and then we nest them into different sequences. And this is certainly what we do in the test stage, of course. And everybody, let's say all our customers have a kind of speciality to create these scenarios in a different way. But this is not the only function of the test stage. It's not just about running the rig. The test stage enables you to monitor your specimen with different options, as for instance, trend, point by point, or spectral. In RPC Connect, we even have implemented a test inspection interval now in order to do your cracking testings, whatever you might call them. It's like spot checks or whatever you might call them. So furthermore, we are able to create reports which will follow in the future releases or calculate the lifetime of our specimen with the equivalent usage options, as you know from Pro. Creating these tests creating the test stage in RPC Connect led us to some questions. So what is or what was disturbing in RPC Pro running the test application? We figured out that the way of setting limits is a big problem. It is somehow cumbersome and not very intuitive. So hence we tried to change the behavior and improve this in RPC Connect. Furthermore, once a sequence is created and there's a need of changing some files, that can be very, very time consuming if you have nested sequences or a lot of files included in your test scenarios. All this led to a similar but improved idea of using the test stage in RPC Connect. So be curious about the things we will discuss within the next half an hour here in our webinar. Any questions so far, Paul?
Just 2 quick questions. What do you exactly mean by remapping files is the first one.
So yeah, based on remapping your files, it's like if you have created a test sequence with the help of these different scenarios you recreated. So once you want to change, for example, in this case, the pothole drive file, you play that one out 200 times, and you want to change this file and replace it with something different because you did a mistake or whatever, you can just remap them. That's what we call remapping. And to do that, we invented a new feature in RPC Connect, which I will show by the end of the seminar. Yeah. I heard there was a second question.
In addition, what is meant by interfile delay reduced?
Okay, the interfile delay reduced. That one is focusing on the drive playout from RPC Pro in the test stage, from RPC Connect in the test stage. So when RPC Pro was playing out one drive file and then switching to the second file in your drive sequence, for example, that was somehow taking a lot of time, and that, yeah, time is reduced. That is meant by the interfile delay. So playing out one drive file after each other, that time in between is reduced. Okay, anything else?
That's it for now.
Okay, great. Then I will continue. So on the next slides, let's have a look how the test stage looks in RPC Connect and compare it a little bit to RPC Pro. The wizard, as you know, will guide us through the process again, as we are now used from the stages model and simulate. In this webinar, we do not have much time to discuss about all of these 5 points which are shown here, but we will focus on the main options and ideas implemented in the software. However, as you can see, we first need to select our setup here, number 1, and then create or select our sequence, and finally monitor the test specimen and run the chosen sequence. The view status node here, the section will allow to make changes on the limits already chosen, but the way to do that changed in comparison to RPC Pro. Let's go and compare RPC Pro and Connect and then explore the wizard to see some differences here. So after the correct setup is selected, or let's say, basically, this is the window, the defined sequences window, which we are going to talk about now in RPC Connect then. So you should be familiar with that from RPC Pro. Just an information for our or one remark for our customers here, the sequence builder, which was here on the upper right corner, that one is gone in RPC Connect. Okay, here it is. The content of the select sequence node is shown. And basically, you can divide the settings into 3 categories. So category 1 here is for creating and selecting your sequence. Number 2 is for choosing the equivalent usage in terms of your sequence or per time history file as known from RPC Pro. And in number 3 here, we will be able, or it allows us to define your sequence with the appropriate files. As you know from RPC Pro, you will be only able to see the drives with the ending drive_fin. So please make sure to name your files accordingly to find them here in the wizard. The area marked here for number 1 is for creating a sequence. Easily hit the plus sign, which you see here, to create your sequence, or use the drop-down menu with the help of these little arrows down, and then you will be able to create your sequence file. This little button here will allow you to see some properties of your selected sequence, so which you see here in the lower corner, which files are used, how many repeats do they have, and so on. Please remember that we now have a sequence playout tool in RPC Connect, which you can run as a separate tool, of course, but this feature is only available if you choose for the test stage. So if you choose for the test stage, this module will be available in all stages and everywhere in the tools. If not, this one is not there for you. Now the main idea of creating a sequence is the same as it was in RPC Pro. So select your drive fins and then shift them from the left here to the right with the new functionalities we have like drag and drop and so on, which we will see in a second when I do the live demo. The passes will be available all the time and it's not being asked only when you shift from left to right. So in RPC Pro, when you selected the file, shifted it to the right, it was directly asking you for the repeats. And then this time, or for the passes then. And this time we have a special column here, and this column will just enable you to change the number of passes whenever you want. We have 2 little buttons here on the top right, which will enable you to collapse or uncollapse the whole sequence. This can be very useful for a lot of nested sequences, which we will see in a while. Nesting any sequences is pretty straightforward, as you know from RPC Pro. So the sequences, once you create them, will pop up here down below. In this case, we have RPC basic course sequence, for example, shown up. And while selecting that one, hitting that button here, it goes to the right and you're starting to nest your sequences. Okay, alternatively, to create any sequence, you can use the sequence editor. So it has the same function and as the select sequence node we just discussed. The only difference is that you can open the sequence editor from every stage in the tool list, which I told you is only accessible when you choose the test module. So let's have a real example here and see how we create any sequence. So currently we are looking at the new surface of RPC Connect, and we are in the test wizard, as you can see here from the tab. It's highlighted in white, and this is what is showing me where I'm currently sitting. We need to choose our setup, and this time I just choose an image. Hopefully you can remember from webinar number 1 that we were able to choose any pictures we want for the setup. So this is an indicator for me that I selected the right setup here. Then I go to the next node, which is the select sequence node, of course. What I did here in RPC Connect is I created some time history files, which you can see here. We have 9 different time history files where we want to create our sequence from. So basically this is done from an iteration process, and then we get this from simulate delivered here to the test stage, and we can use it right now. If I'm in the time history folder, we can use the splitter, as you know. I shift the window to the left to give me more space here and read my files and see if I have selected the right files, or if I'm in the current active data set, which I am, which is currently marked in dark blue. And then here I go to the left and see in the select sequence node, I see a lot of files which I'm not really interested in. So what we can do here in RPC Connect, as you may remember, I just do a right click, choose my columns, and then I'm saying, okay, I'm interested in the stage because I want to just pick the files from the test stage. And then I'm interested, let's say, not in the workspace, not in the data set, and only in the name. That is important for me. So I just go ahead and sort it out as I wish to have it. And this is the way of, finally being sure that I'm in the right data set or in selecting the right files. So let's do a filtering, which is, let's say, a realistic example. In this case, I just want to have the test files created. And then what I'm interested in is, for example, the name. And I put the name here to the left. And then I see the stage, the name. And this is what I use to create my sequence finally. So I'm going to hit the plus button here, as I showed on my slides. I press the plus button and say, this is sequence _1. And then I am able to create any files or shift any files to the sequence. Let's make it quite easy. I'm just doing a drag and drop here with all the 9 files I have here. And I'm just basically changing the passes here. Let's go this one 10 times, this 2 times, just some numbers I'm deciding here to run anything which I'm interested in. So this is basically sequence number 1 I just created. And I'm going to create another sequence to nest them a little bit, that we get a kind of real scenario here. So I'm pressing the plus button again, typing in the terms SE, for example. RPC Connect will just directly show me that sequence 1 already exists. And if I just go ahead and click here, I can change the number. And now I got sequence 2. And what you see here, same behavior as in RPC Pro. Now sequence 1 is available. Sequence 2 is the current one I'm working in. So I'm able to nest the sequence here. So I press this button, check it on the right. So sequence 1 with all the files included is showing up here. And then I am able to, let's say, put some other files here and say, okay, sequence 1 will be repeated 2 times. And then again, I adapt my dry fins with the repeats I want to have. And let's say this is sequence 2. And to have another example, we just create our final durability test here. Let's say we call it durability test. And then I nest just the 2 sequences here inside and say, okay, I just want to have, for example, the jumping file at the end of all the sequences repeated like 2 times. I'm happy with that. And saying sequence 2 has to repeat 2 times. And then this is my final sequence. And as I told you, we have the collapse and uncollapse buttons here. So if I expand all, I will see directly the whole sequence. And if I click on that button, it will just jump back and I will see, okay, sequence 1 is included, 2, and then a single drive file, which you see here. Okay, let's say this is our sequence we want to create, and we activate the equivalent usage. So meaning that each drive file here gets a special unit, or in this case, I decided for the mileage, which you needed to do in the simulate stage, which you're aware of, I hope, from webinar number 3, which I showed there. So in this case, we can see that running these this whole sequence will last for roughly about 80,000 kilometers. My car is suffering 80,000 kilometers for my road scenarios. And yeah, let's play this drive. Let's say this is our final selected sequence, which we want to work on and measure some data later on. Okay, any questions so far before we hop on to the monitoring section?
We have a couple questions. Is there a way of randomizing sequence 1?
So I think the customer is asking for, now I'm opening RPC Pro, so it's like using the sequence builder here. Is it that what is, so that you can generate a random random sequence? Is that what the customer is asking for?
Yes, that is.
Yeah, so currently it is not, as far as I know, not included in RPC Connect. So there's no way of doing a random, random file creation out of for your sequence. But it's, as far as I know, it's logged as an improvement idea. So I need to talk to the team and see if this one will be included or not. I have no answer to that.
Okay, 2 more questions. What dimension units are available for equivalent usage?
Okay, for the equivalent usage, yeah, so I told you that I choose for the unit kilometers. So when we go back to simulate here, let's do that a second, please. Let's have a look. So in simulate, when you are, this is the simulate wizard, and when we go back to our iterations here, on the finish node, you could select your final drive files. And in this case, you see the dimension, and the dimension here is for the equivalent usage is just completely open. You can choose whatever you want. So everything which is available in RPC Connect, you can choose it as an equivalent usage. Hope this answers the question.
During the demo, I saw a play minus button. What is the function of this button in the creating test sequence area?
So the play minus button, let's have a look here. Setup, sequence. Okay, I got that one. So the play minus button, I think the customer is referring to that one here. This little button here is just replacing anything you did. So when you have, for example, selected any drive file here, you can directly replace it. So swap it, I would call it. So if I select a jump drive file and then hit this button here, so depending on which sequence are, you can just briefly swap them around and directly replace them. So not deleting them and then including them. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Another question.
Okay, anything else?
Can you still copy and paste off of a text file or Excel sheet into the file name repeat section?
File name repeat section. Let's have a look. So copy and paste basically from Excel is possible. That improved a lot in RPC Pro and RPC Connect. But let's see where the repeat section is. So the passes itself, I guess, what it is. So let's create a sequence and call it test repeat. Say, okay, I'm just putting some numbers here. So I guess the customer is asking for changing the passes here. I'm just opening the Excel and having a look if it's working or not. Let's do an example here to prove the software. So let's go for something like that. I hope this is okay. And then I just use CTRL-R and-C, and now I'm using CTRL-R-V, and this seems to be possible, yes. Any other questions?
Just a comment that randomization that we talked about previously is necessary, as durability files are sometimes played thousands of times.
Yeah, got that one. I will put that on priority list and talk to the team what we can do. Okay.
And that's all I have right now.
Okay, thanks. So we will hop into the monitoring section. So now we are curious how we can set any limits and change values for trend, point-by-point, and spectral monitoring. So the old behavior in RPC Pro was, as I told you at the beginning, it was somehow a little bit cumbersome. Well, let's have a look. So this is the window you should be all familiar with. So once a limit was triggered in RPC Pro, a red little lamp here on the top was a kind of indicator showing that a limit was tripped. And sometimes changing the limits here was a kind of burden as the wrong response was selected or a little indicator gone away, and you needed to keep your values in mind and change it in the, let's say, define monitoring section. And this was a little bit weird or sometimes hard to handle with. So how did we solve that problem in RPC Connect? How did we make it easier to change and see the trip limits? And in RPC Connect, we keep the two-way systems of settings here. So we still got the define monitoring section node and a so-called view status node. I know this is quite hard to see here on the picture, but we will see it in a live demo soon. So however, these nodes can be divided into, let's say, 3 categories. So once we reach the test wizard node here, we can divide it into 3 categories. And let's say number 1 is just to allow and define our limits here, this section. Number 2, that will allow us to choose the limit source of a manual input or appropriate limits. The user can choose between the options which were available in RPC Pro, like statistics, manual, and full scale. And number 3 here will allow to choose multiple time histories to transfer the chosen limits from the upper window, or let's better say the currently selected response file. So in RPC Pro, it was like you had only the option to apply all, or you could say just apply to the current response file I'm working with. In RPC Connect, we can now select different files, and we will see that in a second to clearly more see what happens when we do that and what advantage this will bring for the software. So, but before we do that, let's have a closer look in each node section. So this is now zoomed in on the wizard again. Here's the defined monitoring section, and this will allow to choose between point-by-point, spectral, and trend options, of course. And these options depend on the licenses you bought or you selected while you were buying RPC Connect, of course. So not everything is available for all our customers. With the little checkbox here on the top, you can see that you can activate and deactivate the monitoring options, of course. In RPC Pro, you need to go through each monitoring section and deactivate let's say you deactivated the monitoring section you did not want. And here you just click on one checkbox and everything is then unchecked and not regarded as a defined monitoring option then. Okay. The layout stays as discussed on the previous slide. So choose your monitoring options, set your limits, select your files, and carry them over to select your limits here for the appropriate file. And information for our customers here, for the first release of RPC Connect, there will be only these 3 options available, like point-by-point, trend, and spectral. The fatigue pairs and the fatigue cumulative and the ZXP, which you're knowing from RPC Pro, these are not included in the first release, just to let you know. But they are planned for the future releases, of course. Some of them, I think fatigue, but ZXP, I need to clarify if that one is coming. That is, I think, not planned for the release so far for release 1. However, let's go discuss an easy trend example here. So here's the trend window from RPC Pro. I think most of you can remember this window. And now let's have a look how this behavior is looking like in RPC Connect. As you can see here, we have the same settings as we were used from RPC Pro. The operator can set the calculation method, set the lower and upper limit warnings, and noticeable difference here to RPC Pro is that the operator can deactivate and activate the min-max values. So if you're selecting on these tabs here and unchecking these boxes, you can directly choose what trend in this example will just measure or not. So while selecting these checkboxes instead of going to the specific tabs, this is a little bit faster than in RPC Pro. Now, this is how we set up some limits in the response files we are interested in. So the available channel list offers the all drive_fin underscore response files which are available in this case, and selecting these files and shifting them from the left to the right and pressing apply to. So this list would be extended. If I would have like 10 different files, I would see here 9 files because one file I'm currently working on. And then I can just drag and drop them here from the left to the right, shift them. And once I hit apply to, all the limits I set in the above window will be applied to the specific response. So maybe some of you already realized that we have a few new buttons on the layout structure. And here you can see that now we got the possibility of undo and redo. So if you see these buttons here, you can undo and redo some settings which you have done for defining your limits. And I tried it out because in the first webinar, I had no questions to that. So it's 5 steps. You can go back and forth. So yeah, that's a good thing to have. If you mistyped something or did a mistake during changing your limits, you can go back, and RPC Connect is saving the last steps you did. So the next thing, which I already mentioned, is the possibility of choosing specific files and transferring them, transferring the limits to them. So now let's have a look and go for an example again and see how we set any limits in RPC Connect. So this is the define monitoring section here. And as I told you, just click and unclick, you will see that it activates and deactivates. And what I was talking about was when we go back to RPC Pro now, the define monitoring section here, you need to go through each tab here and then say enable, disable. And this is like changing a little bit here in RPC Connect. Just click on one and say, okay, I'm just going to have trend for my webinar number 4, where we want to measure some, let's have a trend monitoring option here. If I click on trend now on this node directly, you will see now I'm currently working on the file Belgisch block, and these are the limits or the trend monitoring options I have. And as I told you here down below, you will see in my case 8 more files. In total, we have 9 files where we do our monitoring on. So still the calculation methods like full scale, manual, statistics are available. This little symbol will tell you that RPC is still waiting for any information coming into the software, meaning that no reference file so far is generated, or this specific drive file was not played out. So we still do not have any information to fill the table here in. And in my case, I have 4 displacement channels. It's an easy 4 poster system I'm currently using, not as usual the 329 system. So we are using a 4-corner system, 4 accelerations, 4 displacements. And let's say, just for an example, we are going to set the accelerometers on manual, fill them down, and say the lower limit is, for example, -5, and then fill down and say +5 for the upper limit, just to have an example here, fill down. And let's say, for example, I'm just going to change any limits here, 1, 2, 3, and then I say, oh, that was stupid what I just made, so let's use the undo button, and you see RPC is jumping to the appropriate cell and then directly correcting the steps which I accidentally mistype or whatever I did here. So, okay, let's keep it for this and say, I don't want to have the RMS, I don't want to have the standard deviation, I don't want to have the range. We are just going to measure maximum and minimum values. Let's keep the minimum as it is, and the maximum I will have like a change of the table, which you saw here. And then you could select, like, let's say we have 3 different files here. I want to have these 3 different files selected, and I just only want to have like minimum and maximum, setting these limits or transferring these limits to these 3 files. So if I hit the apply to now, the apply to will give these limits with these selected statistics to these 3 special files. So if I then say, okay, I have some other files, let's say Cobblestone, for example, and Cobblestone should get like a 2 here. Oh, sorry, a -2 because it's a lower limit. Okay, it can be positive because my upper limit is still high enough. But anyway, if I want to make this change here, I can say, okay, I just want to apply this one to Cobblestone and the Belgisch block here. If I hit apply to, these limits will be transferred. So in my example, I'm just going for, let's say, everything. So I'm selecting them, drag and drop, or use directly that button here. And then I click on apply to. So all my files will get the same trend monitoring options. And I'm, let's say, finishing with that and saying this is an example we want to run. We want to run the software here. Okay, that's the way of defining our monitoring. Let's have a look here. So, yeah, any questions so far, Paul? Just to give me a rest to drink something.
One question, do we have to pay for each type of monitoring, ergo point-to-point, trend, spectral?
That is a question I would say we need to defer to our sales team. So I'm not familiar with that, but as far as I know, in RPC Pro, it was the same, that each license has to be bought individually. But yeah, we need to get in touch with our sales guys. They have the appropriate answer to that.
Understood. That's it.
Okay, now that we have chosen our limit options and created our sequence to play out, we are ready to run the durability test. So the test, or the next wizard node I will show, replaces the execute tab from RPC Pro. So this one, which I'm currently showing here. So as usual, the sequence will show up here. The overall progress is on the top here, which you can see. The main idea of selecting the start-stop option stayed the same. So we added a few functionalities here, which I will show you on the next slides to start and stop the test here. Again, we are looking at the define run node. Here's the divided, I tried to divide, let's say, the define run node into options or categories. So the first here on the top, which you see here, this allows to start the durability test or durability run, or the previous created some reference files if they are not available. So if you select the radio button down below here, you create the reference files. If you click on play sequence, you are of course going to run your durability test. Number 2 allows to stop the test. The options I will discuss on the next slides you will see in a second. Number 3 is all for the archiving options, so archiving our response and so on. Number 4 is for our customers who have the echo connection ready. And number 5 is, yeah, for creating custom processes to run after a drive sequence or a drive playout. The start test options are shown here. So everywhere where you see this little new symbol, this is some kind of new functionality compared to RPC Pro. So in RPC Pro, you were not able to start the test after a certain percentage, for example. This is now added. So some people might now think, oh, you weren't able to start that, but I think that was only the stop option. So you could stop the test after a certain percentage, but not start the test. So another feature added is typically before you start the test, the folders such as statistic, reference files, and so on, they should be cleaned from the previous one. So if you copy a data set which you already used and there are still some old files from your previous run, just click on this little, let's call it broom symbol. On this little broom symbol, that will fulfill the task for you. So it's going to delete all the statistic, response files, and so on. So at the beginning of the test, you make sure that you are starting with a fresh folder structure and fresh, clear startup sequence. Okay, now let's have a look at the stop feature. Stopping the test will get a new feature called the sequence completion. So these functions were added on a need of basis of our customers. So again, thanks for giving us some heads up here to improve the test section here. Most of the time, a durability run is interrupted by a test inspection interval for crack initiation purposes, or let's say other checking procedures. So this functionality was added, and maybe you can remember that I showed that in webinar number 1 in the test state itself. So you're basically defining what should happen once the test inspection is triggered or reached. You might think of an event that the rig needs to be turned off, or let's say needs to be scheduled for until the testing time is reached. So with the help of this test inspection interval, you can fulfill your needs there. Okay, last but not least, we need to have an overview tab to see the progress of our durability run and watch the limits being tripped. The view status node will fulfill this task. So here you can directly make your changes, and there is no need to go back to the defining monitoring section to make these changes continue to continue your run. So all related warnings and issues will be shown in this node. So how does it look like now when we trigger a trend limit, for example? Or in this case, I think, I choose for a point by point, sorry for that. So finally, we see how a triggered limit looks like. The first thing you will recognize here is that RPC will highlight it next to the control panel. So this is our control panel, as you know. We are currently in the attached stage. And there you see that the warning symbol pops up. So hovering with the mouse over these problems, for example, as you see here down below in the view status node, you will see that the problem is highlighted, and we will see all the channels which currently are tripped. In this case, and a lot of channel limits are tripped, just to emphasize that you see this kind of information while hovering over the point-by-point node in this case. So clicking directly on this arrow node here will open a new window and show you the triggered limits and with all the values. So let's see how this looks like. This slide looks a little bit like overloaded, but this is due to the example shown here. So a lot of limits are tripped to see some variety of warnings and errors which might occur during the durability runs. So of course, please always keep in mind to check your specimen and not just hit run and continue with your test once the limit was tripped. However, let's go through an example here in the software to understand the limit triggering behavior a little bit better. And let's run the software to gather some more information. So coming back to RPC Connect here, we're just making sure, as you know, this one is the attached stage. No interlocks are there. If there were any interlocks, I could reset them with the help of this button here. And let's make sure that our system is up and running in the right position. All looks fine. So we continue to go on the define run section, which we discussed on our notes here. So this is the overall progress shown here. And this is the slide which showed you the different categories. I categorized that into 5 different sections here. And then now we have no reference files so far generated. So if I click on the reference files, we see that nothing exists here. So the first step, what we are going to do is just create some reference files. Let me check the master span. It's on 100. That's fine. Load reference files for generation. RPC Pro goes in the load stage. I hit the run button. And now the status bar here is showing me that RPC Connect is recording or playing out the drive file. And then once the check mark is here, we see that the Belgish block now run fine. And then there's a reference file which already exists, and it's updating it on purpose, of course. The nice thing about that is here, the new generate reference file section enables to run specific files. So in RPC Pro, when let's say there was an interruption or something else, it was like a little bit weird with the reference files. And in RPC Connect now, you can select just specific files with having these boxes marked, and then I can just only create reference files for the specific selected files. Okay, while this is running, the tab here in trend monitoring, due to getting reference files, should update. Let's have a look here. So as you can see here, these one were set to manual, of course. These limits will not change. And in this case, the displacement of my actuators is getting some files here. You see that we have some recorded values, and after the first reference one, all my values are put in. And I can see directly my low and upper limits based on the reference values calculated. Okay, once this is done, we are just going to play out the sequence here. So let's go and play out the sequence. By the way, our statistics folder here, if we go here in the statistics folder, you know we have a new statistics folder. And now the trend monitoring stuff is, once we play that out, the trend will be listed up here in a second. And then we can see that the trend is a new way of showing the upper and lower limits, which we will see in a second. So let's go and load the sequence here. Press play. And then the system is recording and triggering something. You see that here, that the trend monitoring option is now filling it with min, max, mean, the typical files which went through the time history folder and were causing some kind of trouble to finding my files are now located here. And yeah, let's go and trip any limit. And the basic idea is just to ramp down the master span here in order to directly trip any limit. So let's just do it. That RPC recognizes any changes in my drive file. Just to give you an example, of course, we will have a lot of limits triggered, but just for showing you what the software is doing. So now it triggered the limit, the test stopped. And then if I hover here, it says, okay, the trend limit was triggered now or tripped. If I hover over that button, of course, you will see all the channels are tripped now because my example was of ramping down the master span. But if I click now on the trend section here, I see directly all the limits which might have been tripped or which are tripped. And I can just easily go here, say, change that one. I will change the value to -2 or whatever, and then do my changes I need to do for the trend section. And then I can, again, the same behavior as it was in the define monitoring section here. I can select like several files and say, okay, these changes are made depending on what I select for the statistics here, should be just applied to these specific responses. And then hitting apply to, I could just continue my test here. And that is the way of easily showing and creating any new files for trend and so on. With the help of these symbols here, you can directly send the trend monitoring stuff to your time history plotter or to your trend statistic plotter. So either way I can just mark it from here, or I can just say click on that button and it will send it directly to a plotter I'm creating or using. So just to go back to the section I told you right now that the upper and lower limits are showing a little bit different. Let's maximize this window here. What you can see, it's just an example. I'm not really sure what I clicked on, but anyway, that you can just see that there's a kind of the range of your lower and upper limit, like the 20% I said here, for example. This one is shown in a more graphical way that you see some coloring and directly see where your limits might lie. Okay, docking that back again down below here. That is the thing. We just collected some of some files here or some data to explore. And the last thing I want to show to you guys is the new way of remapping in RPC Connect our drive files. So once you have a complex sequence with a lot of files, it can be very, very hard to remap your files. I mean, many customers who used a lot of files know what I'm talking about. So for that reason, in the new RPC Connect software, we implemented a kind of auto match function for remapping your files. So the system will automatically search for your files in the test stage folder, which may fit to the drive file change you are planning. So you can even define the strictness of the auto match. Let's go for an example back here again. So imagine the scenario is I selected the wrong file in my sequence, for example, or I made anything, let's say I needed to reiterate some signals here. I'm just going to, let's say, copy and paste a new file. Sorry for that one. Let's go here and I'm just going to copy and paste a new file. I'm just in the statistics folder. Let's go back. So let's say I have the breaking event and I want to replace the breaking event here. So what I'm doing is I'm importing my new file. Just imagine breaking event number 2 is the new file I imported. So let's go for example, and I just want to remap this file. So the old breaking drive file 1 or drive file fin here should be replaced with the breaking drive fin number 2. So what you can do is you're just going basically to click on this remap drive button. Then a new window will open. And this window is showing you the match strictness. So what it is going to do is the file is being searched in the folder, in the appropriate folder, in my case here in the breaking, in the time history folder. And I select the strictness of 50%. That means that, let's have a look. If I click on auto match here, so sorry, I need to delete the file first, sorry. As we can see here, the breaking file is not there anymore. It's searching for that one. Only the responses are there. So the breaking 2 file is still here. The other one was deleted. Sorry for the crash here. And then now I'm going back again to the remap of the files. So RPC Connect is now giving us a warning. Hey, there's no breaking drive file do you want to have a new file? In RPC Pro, it was like you're just going to double click and then scroll down and reselect your file out of your 100 files you have here in the list. But now we have the auto match button. So click on the auto match, and then RPC Connect will search for the files, including in your folder. And here you see the little 2 I added here will be emphasized. So he found a file which might be related to the one I want to replace, and hitting remap now. So the strictness was set to 50%, depending on how much your names are differentiating. Of course, you can select another strictness here. So in my case, 50% was of course enough. We will see that this one here has a slight change. Clicking on remap will enable to just use my selected sequence right away and continue with my durability test. Okay, that's let's say basically all I wanted to show you for the test stage. Any questions so far here before we hop into the next topic?
A couple questions. Will test progress show the time that has been run of total time, like RPC Pro? Also, will the percentage done be integers only?
Yeah, so I guess the define run section here is what we are referring to. So the question here is like the time. If I select the time, for example, here, let's select the appropriate sequence and do an example here. Let's go for the durability test run and say, okay, here now I need to remap my file, of course, because I just remapped that in the previous, in the previous sequence. So I had another sequence selected. So now we are okay to run this. Let's deactivate the monitoring options. And I think, let me see what, so yeah, let's run the durability test. No worries about that. So, okay, if I go to the define run section, select time here, and then we're just going to play out. I think I need to reconnect now because the software was down. Let's see. Reconnected, I load the sequence, and it's giving me an error message. So basically the question here is that the overall progress, the time elapsed and the total time remaining is showing up here, and yes, it is. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, there's a couple more. When plotting trends in RPC Pro, the plotter would not plot the point on a pass when the trend limit was hit and test aborted. Has this been remedied so that you can better plot and trend movement through time?
Okay, I know what the customer is talking about. So that means that if the trend here is triggered, or let's say the signal's gone out of that limit, to be honest, I don't think that there is a change now for now, but this one is triggered in the list. I will come back to that customer and write an email back once I talk to the team what the final decision is there. Can you, Paul, can you please just log who is the customer, and we will come back to them?
Absolutely. And we've got a couple other involved questions I think we'll deal with that way. They're fairly long.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on.
Okay. Yeah, so the last thing, or the last minutes I want to use from this webinar is we want to say why what we have seen in the last webinar section. So what is the reason for doing the transition to RPC Connect? And I have added some slides to briefly remind you of some benefits of the software. So let's take some time here and scroll through these slides. So the first question is, why change to RPC Connect, or why did we invent RPC Connect? And the main focus was, of course, as you all know, that we wanted to increase the lab efficiency by saying goodbye to the cumbersome behavior of RPC Pro. So we now have a lot of options like filtering and searching, drag and drop, and all that stuff you have seen in RPC Connect during the webinars. That is a benefit. We have created different layouts for you, so you can use like multi-monitoring docking, have RPC Connect on different displays and create your own environment if you want to have that. We have a new model help, which will ramp our customers up, or it's much easier to bring the new people here on board. Another feature which we have briefly shown is that we have now the new process manager, and we have a Python interface to work with. So we have like if conditions, while conditions, and so on, which you can set to create complex processes, which was sometimes really hard to do that in RPC Pro. And then we have the Python interface to communicate with different softwares and write your macros and connect to the software to get a better interface here. The next one we're seeing all the time is the clear time error messages. So there's no not the ones we are used from RPC Pro, like the undocumented error. And we have divided these into 3 different groups here, which you can see the important ones, the problems, and the general events. I think that helps so much to understand what the software is asking for. The next thing we have added some new tools for you. That the software in total, like combining tools, which helps to accomplish similar tasks and helps you just using a few tools to fulfill your needs. And this was added, and we have the matrix builder, for example, the convert unit stuff, and all these things we can talk about a little bit later, who is interested in that. And we have included the wizard, which should strengthen your orientation in the software, that you are guided through the software and none of these options are hidden as it was in RPC Pro. You would need to be a really, really experienced user to find these options. These are all clearly now on the wizards. And then finally, you have seen these slides, I think, more or less. As you already know, we are going to put in further releases like the handling of non-linearities. We are going to include the HSRC stuff. And of course, we talked about the smart interface and limits and error settings here, which all in total should increase your lab efficiency. And this is the main reason of choosing for RPC Connect then. And this will be a kind of benefit for you when you have the software. It will be including, and of course further development is going on in RPC Connect, of course. For our IT guys, so let's say for people who want to renew their lab or know what the minimum recommendation is for the RPC usage here, there's only the slide which shows you what RPC, what MTS recommends for the software to have at least, and what computer performance is needed to run RPC Connect smoothly. And however, you have always the choice to go to the mts.com page and then go to the MTS RPC site and then inform yourself when something is changing and get new information on the software while we are improving that and bringing the software to release that. And so connect yourself to our sales group and be prepared to make the transition to Connect. You have the old way of getting angry and dealing with the cumbersome behavior, or you have now the new way of working with RPC Connect and make yourself and your, let's say, employees happy. So, this is all I wanted to say in this webinar. So thanks for joining this session. And I think there's now some time for some questions. And let's go ahead, Paul. Is there anything for me to answer?
Sure. Here's one. Our enter file time was around 10 seconds in RPC Pro. What would this be reduced to in RPC Connect?
So the file length, of course, is the same. I mean, we have the time history, which is played out like 10 seconds. It's 10 seconds will be in RPC Connect as well. The only thing which is changing is the file change. So when it's loading and then playing out the second file, the time in between changing one time history to the next time history will be reduced. So typically RPC Pro was like recalculating anything in between and doing its operations, and then after finishing that, it was switching to the next let's say drive file, and that is reduced based on the things you're let's say calculating and doing. So that is not that the time length has to, of course we are playing out in real time. If the time length is 10 seconds, it stays 10 seconds, of course.
Okay.
Next one.
When plotting trends in RPC Pro, the plotter would not plot the point on a pass when the trend limit was hit and test aborted. Has this been remedied so that you can better plot trend movement through time?
I think that question was the same we had previously.
Oh, yes, it is. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
We've got a few more fairly involved questions I think we'll take offline. Here's one. Is it possible to send the overall progress test status to the Echo software?
Yeah, so that is possible. If you go here to the Echo section and click on Publish the test results to Echo, this overall progress, depending on what you select in the Echo software, of course, this will be shown up. So this is possible if you have like a main window where all the rigs are connected, let's say, and you want to see on one window the overall progress from each from each test run. Of course, that is possible now in RPC Connect. Yeah.
Another question, if reference files are not available, how can I get my limits in advance?
Yeah, so if I get the question right, if these reference files are not there and you want to make sure that you run your rig with any limits set so far, you have basically, you go back to the select sequence node here. You go to the trend node here. So based on the node you are working on, and you have this tiny little button, and this little button is doing basically the same as RPC Pro. So if we hover back to RPC Pro and then go to the trend monitoring section, you had like this recalculate button here. And this recalculate button is somehow, the same here behavior in RPC Connect. You just click on that button here, and then there's a new window opening and asking you for the reference value from an alternative source. So meaning you can select the time history, for example, you can select the table where you get your files data in, or you can select like values from responses. So if you have like from the simulate stage some values, some data gathered already, you can select that one and then say, okay, apply to all responses. So this is basically the way how you redefine that. We can talk a little bit about that later on, but and seeing we are running out of time, but yeah, you can select that and additionally choose the options you had in RPC Pro and some additional stuff. Yeah. Anything else?
Okay. Last one. Is there any way to correlate pass number via plotter to see the equivalent usage or time in the sequence?
So to order the, can you repeat please, Paul?
Is there any way to correlate pass number via plotter to see the equivalent usage or time in the sequence?
Okay, so the question should be if these passes here can be correlated and seen on the plotter, right?
Yeah. There's
no,
additional text.
No.
In addition, they say, we sometimes see a trend and we will move the limit and then later find an issue physically on the test and try to look back to when the trend was changed to get a better idea of when actual issue happens, but it is very hard to link pass number to equivalent usage.
Yeah, yeah. Got that point. I know what is focusing at. I don't think that is an easy one to, let's say, bring it into the software. For the first release, I don't think that it will be changed, but I can talk to, I have a meeting later on with our colleagues. I will talk to them and see what they think about the idea. I like the idea, it's a good one. The question is of how is it interfering, or how is it like correlated with the programming stuff in the software, if there's a big change needed, or maybe it's like, okay, we can do that right away. I need to clarify that. Yeah, thanks for the good advice here. I think we need such information to improve the software in a way that it fulfills more your needs. Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay. Do you have time for one more?
We can take one more, of course, yeah.
Okay. We have had trouble with archive not saving data if that file had not played recently at archive points. Will there be anything to either take a copy of last played RSP for each drive at archive point or next RSP after archive point?
Yeah, so I think it's basically referring to the frames we are using. So RPC Connect still works in frames. That means that if the frame, let's say you need to have like the frame is getting if you have below that value, of course, the frame will be filled. And I think what we can do here is only the same option as you had in Pro, archive the response on a board, and then you get what you get. So depending which frame it's currently at, it's giving you that data, not more, not that's it. Yeah, thanks for attending these webinars, and stay all healthy, and yeah, talk to you soon.